Hi, I'm Sophia. Last Tuesday, my family sold what they believed was their textile manufacturing company to Meridian Industries for $18 million. They celebrated with champagne and spoke about finally cashing out after 3 generations of hard work. But when the new CEO stood up at the acquisition announcement and said, "Before we proceed, I need to introduce the actual legal owner of Chen Textiles, Sophia Chen," the room went completely silent. My father dropped his champagne glass, my brother's mouth fell open. And my stepmother, who had spent years treating me like an unwelcome guest in my own family business, turned white as the contracts she thought would make her wealthy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But here's what they never knew. While they were arguing about profit margins and expansion strategies in boardroom meetings I wasn't invited to attend, I was quietly building the legal foundation that would eventually prove who had actually been running the company for the past 7 years. The patents, the supplier contracts, the intellectual property that made Chen Textiles worth $18 million. It was all registered under my name, filed during the years when they dismissed my contributions as merely administrative support. Before we dive into how a supposedly powerless daughter systematically secured legal ownership of her family's empire while they treated her like unpaid help, tell me in the comments what time you're watching this and what your relationship is with family business dynamics. Are you the overlooked family member who does the real work, or have you seen this pattern play out in your own experience? I read every single comment because I know what it feels like to be invisible in your own success story. The story begins 5 years ago, on a humid August morning in Portland, Oregon, when I walked into the offices of Chen Textiles for what I thought would be a temporary summer position before starting my MBA program at Northwestern. The building itself was impressive from the outside, a converted warehouse in the Pearl District with floor-to-ceiling windows and the kind of architectural details that suggested both history and prosperity. Chen Textiles had been founded by my grandfather, David Chen, in 1952, as a small operation focused on producing high-quality cotton fabrics for local clothing manufacturers. Under his leadership, the company had grown steadily but remained primarily a regional business with a reputation for reliability rather than innovation. When my father, Michael Chen, took over in 1985, he expanded operations to include synthetic fabric production and secured contracts with several major West Coast apparel brands. By the time I graduated from college with a degree in business administration and a minor in chemical engineering, Chen Textiles employed 47 people and generated approximately $12 million in annual revenue. The company was successful by traditional measures, but it had reached a plateau that my father and brother seemed unable or unwilling to push beyond. My father had always envisioned that my older brother, Daniel, would eventually take over the business. Daniel had an MBA from Stanford and 3 years of experience in corporate consulting, credentials that impressed our family's accountant and legal advisor. What Daniel lacked was any genuine interest in textile manufacturing or any understanding of the technical innovations that could differentiate our products in an increasingly competitive market. I had been fascinated by the intersection of chemistry and fabric production since high school, when I started reading industry publications and researching new fiber technologies during my free time. My undergraduate thesis had examined the potential applications of nanotechnology in textile manufacturing, specifically focusing on moisture-wicking and antimicrobial properties that could create competitive advantages in athletic and medical textiles. When I approached my father about implementing some of these innovations at Chen Textiles, he listened politely, but ultimately dismissed my suggestions as academically interesting but commercially impractical. The conversation took place in his office, surrounded by fabric samples and production schedules that represented decades of established processes he was reluctant to disrupt. "Sophia," he said, his tone carrying the particular patience that adults use when explaining practical realities to idealistic young people, "the textile business is about relationships and reliability. Our customers trust us because we deliver consistent quality on predictable timelines. Innovation is expensive and risky. It's not how family businesses survive for 3 generations." Quote, I understood his perspective, but I also recognized that the textile industry was evolving rapidly. International competition was driving down prices for commodity fabrics, while demand was increasing for specialized materials with enhanced performance characteristics. Companies that could develop proprietary technologies would have sustainable competitive advantages, while those that remained focused solely on traditional manufacturing would face continued margin pressure. That's when I made the decision that would eventually lead to the acquisition announcement 5 years later. Instead of arguing with my father about strategic direction, I decided to prove my concepts through systematic implementation while working within the existing organizational structure. My official title was Administrative Coordinator, which meant I was responsible for managing supplier relationships, tracking inventory levels, and coordinating between our production team and our sales representatives. The role was positioned as an entry-level position that would provide broad exposure to business operations before I left for graduate school. What my family didn't realize was that my administrative responsibilities gave me unprecedented access to every aspect of the company's operations. I knew which suppliers were developing new materials, which customers were requesting products we couldn't currently manufacture, and which production processes were creating inefficiencies that increased costs without adding value. More importantly, I had the authority to make small operational decisions that could be tested and refined without requiring approval from senior management. If I wanted to trial a new supplier relationship or experiment with a modified production process, I could implement changes on a limited basis and measure results before proposing broader adoption. During my first month in the administrative role, I identified 17 specific opportunities for operational improvement, ranging from supplier consolidation that could reduce material costs by 8%, to production scheduling modifications that could increase throughput by 12%. Rather than presenting these findings in a formal report that might be dismissed as theoretical analysis, I began implementing changes systematically and documenting results. The supplier consolidation project was my first major success. Chen Textiles was purchasing cotton and synthetic fibers from 11 different suppliers, each with different quality standards, delivery schedules, and pricing structures. The complexity was creating administrative overhead and preventing us from achieving volume discounts that could significantly reduce material costs. I spent 3 weeks analyzing our purchasing patterns and supplier performance metrics, then identified 4 suppliers who could meet all of our material requirements while providing better pricing and more reliable delivery schedules. The consolidation required renegotiating contracts and modifying some of our production processes to accommodate different material specifications, but the results were immediately measurable. Within 2 months, our material costs had decreased by 9%, while delivery reliability had improved significantly. The changes freed up working capital that could be invested in equipment upgrades and allowed our production team to focus on process optimization rather than managing supplier relationships. My father was pleased with the results, but attributed them to natural business cycle improvements rather than systematic operational changes. Daniel, who was supposed to be learning the business by working closely with our sales team, was focused on expanding our customer base rather than improving operational efficiency. That's when I began to understand that my family's approach to business growth was fundamentally different from mine. They viewed Chen Textiles as a mature company that could grow through expanded sales and marketing efforts. I viewed it as a company with untapped potential that could be realized through technological innovation and operational excellence. The second major project I undertook involved developing new fabric technologies that could differentiate our products in the marketplace. Using my background in chemical engineering and access to our production facilities, I began experimenting with fiber treatments that could create moisture-wicking and antimicrobial properties without requiring expensive synthetic materials. The research and development work took place during evenings and weekends, when the production facility was empty and I could experiment with small batches of materials without disrupting regular operations. I documented every experiment meticulously, recording material specifications, treatment processes, and performance test results in notebooks that I kept in my desk drawer. After 4 months of experimentation, I had developed 3 proprietary treatment processes that could be applied to standard cotton and polyester blends to create performance characteristics typically associated with expensive synthetic materials. The processes were scalable, cost-effective, and could be implemented using our existing production equipment with minimal modifications. The breakthrough came when I produced fabric samples that demonstrated 40% better moisture-wicking performance than standard athletic materials, while maintaining the comfort and durability characteristics that our customers valued. The antimicrobial treatment was even more impressive, reducing bacterial growth by 92% compared to untreated fabrics. I knew these innovations could revolutionize our business, but I also knew that presenting them to my family as informal experiments would likely result in the same dismissive response I had received when discussing theoretical concepts. Instead, I decided to protect the intellectual property by filing patent applications for the treatment processes I had developed. The patent application process required detailed technical documentation, extensive prior art research, and legal consultation with intellectual property attorneys. I used my own savings to cover the legal fees, approximately $8,000 that represented most of my accumulated earnings from college internships and part-time employment. The decision to file patents under my own name rather than Chen Textiles' corporate entity was strategic but risky. I reasoned that individual ownership would give me more control over how the technologies were developed and commercialized, while also protecting my interests if family dynamics changed in ways that could affect my long-term involvement with the company. Within 6 months, I had filed patent applications for 3 separate textile treatment processes, each representing significant commercial potential in markets ranging from athletic apparel to medical textiles. The patents were pending approval, but the applications established priority dates that would protect my intellectual property rights regardless of future business developments. During this same period, I was also systematically documenting and formalizing many of the operational improvements I had implemented throughout the company. Supplier agreements, production process modifications, and quality control systems were all registered under my direct authority, creating a legal framework that established my personal responsibility for many of the innovations that were driving Chen Textiles' improved performance. My family was aware that our operational efficiency had improved significantly over the past year, but they attributed these changes to general business maturation rather than systematic innovation. Our profit margins had increased by 14%, customer satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs, and we had successfully entered 2 new market segments that had previously been dominated by larger competitors. What they didn't realize was that the majority of these improvements were directly attributable to technologies and processes that I had developed and legally protected under my own name. The intellectual property portfolio I was building would eventually become the foundation for Chen Textiles' most valuable assets, but at the time, my family viewed my work as competent administrative support rather than strategic business development. The turning point came during a family dinner in December, approximately 18 months after I had started working at Chen Textiles. Daniel was describing his plans to expand our sales operations into new geographic markets, while my father was explaining his vision for eventually transitioning leadership responsibilities to Daniel over the next 5 years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The conversation was positive and forward-looking, but it was also clear that my role in the company's future remained undefined. I was valued as a reliable administrator who could manage day-to-day operations efficiently, but I wasn't considered a strategic contributor who should be involved in long-term planning decisions. My stepmother Linda, who had married my father 3 years earlier and had no background in business operations, was more direct in her assessment of my contributions. "Sophia's been helpful with organizing things," she said. "But when Daniel takes over, he'll probably want to bring in someone with more experience to handle the administrative work." The comment was delivered casually, as if my future employment at the family business was a minor logistical detail that could be resolved when it became relevant. But it crystallized something important about how my family viewed my role and my value to the organization. That night, I made a decision that would define the next 3 years of my life and ultimately lead to the acquisition announcement that shocked my family. Instead of confronting them about my contributions or demanding recognition for my innovations, I decided to systematically build legal and financial control over the assets that were actually driving the company's success. The strategy was complex and required careful execution over an extended period. I needed to continue developing innovative technologies and operational improvements that would increase the company's value, while simultaneously ensuring that the intellectual property and contractual relationships that created this value were legally protected under my individual ownership. Over the following months, I expanded my patent portfolio to include 7 different textile treatment processes, each with specific applications in high-value market segments. I also began establishing direct relationships with key suppliers and customers, positioning myself as the primary point of contact for the technical innovations that were differentiating our products in the marketplace. The legal structure I was creating was designed to be transparent and beneficial to Chen Textiles' operations. But it also ensured that any potential buyer would need to negotiate directly with me to acquire the intellectual property and relationships that represented the company's most valuable assets. By the time Meridian Industries approached my family about a potential acquisition 3 years later, I owned the patents that enabled our most profitable product lines, held personal contracts with our 3 largest customers, and maintained exclusive relationships with the suppliers who provided the specialized materials required for our innovative manufacturing processes. My family had built a successful traditional textile manufacturing business over 3 generations. But the $18 million valuation that attracted Meridian Industries was based primarily on assets and capabilities that I had developed and legally protected during my years of supposedly administrative work. The acquisition announcement was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Meridian Industries' downtown conference room. My family arrived expecting to sign documents that would transfer ownership of Chen Textiles in exchange for financial compensation that would set them up comfortably for retirement. Instead, they discovered that the most valuable components of their business had been owned by someone they had consistently underestimated and overlooked. The moment when Meridian's CEO introduced me as the actual legal owner wasn't just shocking, it was the culmination of years of systematic preparation that they had never bothered to understand or acknowledge. What happened next would test everything I had learned about business, family dynamics, and the difference between being valued and being valuable. To understand how I systematically secured legal ownership of what my family considered their empire, you need to understand the Chen family dynamics that made my invisible takeover possible. 3 generations of traditional patriarchal business leadership had created blind spots so predictable that I could navigate around them like a detailed roadmap to opportunity. The Chen family story began in 1952 when my grandfather David Chen arrived in Portland with $47, a sewing machine, and an unshakable belief that American manufacturing could provide the foundation for generational wealth. He had learned textile production in his father's small workshop in Guangzhou, but the techniques he brought to Oregon were enhanced by an engineering mindset that treated fabric production as applied chemistry rather than traditional craftsmanship. Grandfather David established Chen Textiles in a rented warehouse space in southeast Portland, initially focused on producing cotton work shirts for local logging and construction companies. His competitive advantage was quality control that exceeded industry standards, achieved through meticulous attention to fiber selection, weaving tension, and finishing processes that most competitors treated as routine production steps. The business grew steadily throughout the 1960s and 1970s as David expanded from work shirts to diversified fabric production for regional clothing manufacturers. His reputation for reliability and quality attracted customers throughout the Pacific Northwest, creating a foundation of relationships that would sustain the company through multiple economic cycles and competitive challenges. When my father, Michael Chen, joined the business in 1978 after completing his degree in business administration at Portland State University, he brought formal management training to complement his father's intuitive understanding of manufacturing excellence. Michael's contributions focused on systematizing operations that David had managed through personal relationships and informal processes. Under Michael's leadership, Chen Textiles transitioned from a small family operation to a professionally managed company, with documented procedures, formal customer contracts, and financial systems that could support expanded operations. The company moved to its current facility in the Pearl District in 1987, occupying a renovated warehouse that provided room for growth and projected the professional image that Michael believed was essential for competing with larger textile manufacturers. The Pearl District location was strategically chosen to position Chen Textiles at the center of Portland's emerging creative economy. The neighborhood was attracting fashion designers, architects, and technology companies that represented potential customers for innovative textile products. Michael's vision was that Chen Textiles could evolve from a regional manufacturer serving established industries to a specialized producer creating materials for emerging market segments. However, Michael's business philosophy remained fundamentally conservative. He valued steady growth over rapid expansion, established relationships over new market exploration, and proven processes over technological innovation. These principles had served the company well during his 25 years of leadership, but they also created operational constraints that limited Chen Textile's ability to capitalize on emerging opportunities in performance fabrics and specialized applications. My older brother Daniel represented the third generation of Chen family leadership, though his path to the business had been indirect. After graduating from Stanford with an MBA in 2019, Daniel had spent 3 years working for McKinsey & Company, advising technology companies on growth strategies and operational optimization. His consulting experience had provided exposure to innovative business models and advanced analytical techniques, but it had not included hands-on experience with manufacturing operations or supply chain management. Daniel's vision for Chen Textiles emphasized market expansion and brand development, rather than operational innovation. He believed the company's future growth would come from selling existing products to new customer segments and geographic markets, rather than developing new technologies or manufacturing capabilities that could create sustainable competitive advantages. The family hierarchy was clearly established and rarely questioned. Grandfather David, now 81, remained actively involved in strategic decisions, but had gradually transferred day-to-day responsibilities to Michael. Michael maintained operational control while preparing to transition leadership to Daniel over the next 5 years. The succession plan was logical, traditional, and completely overlooked the possibility that someone outside the direct patriarchal line might contribute value beyond administrative support. My position within this structure was complicated by factors that had nothing to do with business capability. As the only daughter in a family that had traditionally been led by men, I was expected to be supportive rather than strategic, helpful rather than ambitious. These expectations were reinforced by my stepmother Linda, who had married my father in 2018 and seemed determined to ensure that family resources and attention remained focused on Daniel's career development. Linda's background was in marketing communications, and she had never worked in manufacturing or business operations. However, her perspective on family dynamics and resource allocation carried significant influence with my father, particularly regarding decisions about my role in the company's future. Linda consistently positioned my contributions as temporary assistance rather than permanent value creation, suggesting that my skills would be better utilized in a different industry or company where I would not complicate the family succession plan. The family's financial structure reflected these dynamics. Michael owned 70% of Chen Textiles, with the remaining 30% held in a trust that would eventually transfer to Daniel. No provision had been made for my ownership participation, despite my business education and demonstrated interest in the company's operations. The assumption was that I would pursue independent career opportunities that would not require equity participation in the family business. During family discussions about Chen Textile's future, my input was solicited regarding operational questions but not strategic decisions. I was valued for my ability to analyze production data and coordinate administrative tasks, but I was not included in conversations about long-term vision, market positioning, or capital allocation. The exclusion was not malicious, but it was consistent and complete. This dynamic created unique opportunities for someone with entrepreneurial instincts and technical expertise. While my family focused on traditional business development approaches, I could pursue innovations that they did not understand or value. While they concentrated on managing existing operations, I could develop new capabilities that would eventually become essential to the company's competitive position. My undergraduate education had provided preparation that was uniquely relevant to textile manufacturing innovation, though my family did not recognize its strategic value. The combination of business administration and chemical engineering had given me knowledge of both market dynamics and technical processes, enabling me to identify opportunities that existed at the intersection of customer needs and manufacturing capabilities. During college, I had completed internships with 2 companies that were developing advanced textile technologies. Nike's Materials Innovation Lab had provided exposure to performance fabric development, including moisture-wicking treatments and fiber modifications that enhanced athletic performance. Intel's Wearable Technology division had introduced me to conductive fabrics and electronic textiles that could integrate digital functionality into clothing and accessories. These experiences had shown me that the textile industry was evolving rapidly toward specialized applications that required deep technical expertise and significant research and development investment. Companies that could develop proprietary technologies for performance fabrics, medical textiles, and electronic applications would command premium pricing and sustainable competitive advantages. Companies that remained focused on commodity production would face continued margin pressure from international competition. My family's perspective on these market trends was shaped by their successful experience with traditional manufacturing approaches. They had built a profitable business by focusing on reliability, quality, and customer service rather than technological innovation. The assumption was that these competitive advantages would continue to be sufficient for future success, particularly if the company could expand its customer base and geographic reach. The disconnect between my analysis of industry trends and my family's strategic priorities became apparent during my first few months working at Chen Textiles. I could see opportunities for developing innovative products that would address unmet market needs, but I lacked the authority to pursue these opportunities through official company channels. My suggestions were considered interesting but impractical, given the capital investment and technical expertise that would be required for implementation. That's when I began to understand that entrepreneurial success within a family business might require unconventional approaches to resource acquisition and business development. If I could not convince my family to invest in innovation through traditional channels, I would need to develop innovations independently and prove their commercial viability before seeking broader organizational support. The administrative coordinator role that my family had created for me provided perfect cover for this strategy. My responsibilities included managing supplier relationships, which gave me access to information about new materials and production technologies that were becoming available in the market. I was also responsible for inventory management, which provided detailed understanding of our production processes and cost structures. Most importantly, my role included coordinating between our production team and our sales representatives, which meant I had comprehensive knowledge of customer requirements and market opportunities that we were not currently addressing. I could identify specific gaps between what customers needed and what we could produce, then develop solutions that would create value for both parties. The patent development work that I began during my first year at Chen Textiles was enabled by this comprehensive understanding of market needs and production capabilities. Rather than pursuing innovations that might be technically interesting but commercially questionable, I focused on developing technologies that would address specific customer requirements while leveraging our existing manufacturing infrastructure. The first patent application I filed covered a textile treatment process that could enhance moisture-wicking performance in standard cotton and polyester blends. The technology was developed specifically to address requirements from 3 athletic apparel customers who had requested performance fabrics but been unwilling to pay premium prices for synthetic materials. My treatment process could provide similar performance characteristics at significantly lower cost, creating competitive advantages for both Chen Textiles and our customers. The second patent application protected an antimicrobial treatment that could be applied during standard dyeing processes without requiring additional equipment or production steps. This innovation addressed growing demand for medical textile applications, where infection control was essential but cost constraints limited adoption of expensive antimicrobial fibers. The third patent covered a dyeing process modification that could produce color-changing effects in response to temperature variations. This technology had potential applications in fashion textiles and safety clothing, representing new market segments that Chen Textiles had never served but could access with minimal additional investment. Each patent application was developed through systematic experimentation using Chen Textiles' production facilities during evenings and weekends when regular operations were not active. I documented every experiment meticulously, recording material specifications, process parameters, and performance test results that would support the patent applications and future commercial development. The legal fees for patent filing were significant relative to my administrative coordinator salary, but the investment was essential for protecting intellectual property that would eventually become Chen Textiles' most valuable assets. I used savings accumulated during college and lived extremely frugally during the patent application period, viewing the financial sacrifice as necessary preparation for long-term success. My family was aware that I was working additional hours at the facility, but they interpreted this activity as dedication to my administrative responsibilities, rather than independent research and development work. The assumption was that I was using extra time to organize inventory, update customer files, or prepare production reports, rather than conducting experiments that would generate patentable innovations. This misunderstanding was facilitated by my deliberate decision to maintain low visibility around my innovation work. I did not discuss my experiments with family members or colleagues, and I conducted all research during times when the facility was empty. The patents were filed under my individual name rather than Chen Textiles' corporate entity, which meant that my family had no knowledge of the intellectual property portfolio I was developing. The supplier relationship work that was part of my official responsibilities provided additional opportunities for building strategic advantages that my family did not recognize. As I consolidated our supplier base to achieve cost savings and operational efficiencies, I also established personal relationships with key suppliers who were developing innovative materials and production technologies. These relationships enabled me to gain early access to new materials that could enhance our product capabilities, often months before they became available to other manufacturers. I also learned about emerging technologies and market trends that could create opportunities for Chen Textiles, information that was not available through traditional industry publications or trade associations. Most importantly, the supplier relationships I developed were structured as personal professional connections rather than corporate partnerships. While Chen Textiles benefited from improved pricing and service levels, the relationships themselves were based on my individual expertise and communication rather than the company's purchasing volume or market position. This approach ensured that any future business development based on these supplier relationships would require my direct involvement and could not be transferred to other personnel without my cooperation. The structure was beneficial to Chen Textiles in the short term, but it also created strategic assets that I controlled individually rather than corporate assets that the company owned. The customer relationship development that resulted from my coordination responsibilities followed similar patterns. As I worked with our sales representatives to address customer requirements and resolve production issues, I became the primary technical contact for many of our most important accounts. Customers began contacting me directly when they had questions about product specifications, delivery schedules, or custom manufacturing requirements. My technical expertise and comprehensive understanding of our production capabilities enabled me to provide more detailed and accurate information than our sales representatives could offer, creating value that customers recognized and appreciated. Over time, many customers began to view me as Chen Textiles' technical expert and primary problem-solving resource. When they had challenging requirements or unusual specifications, they would contact me directly rather than working through official sales channels. This dynamic enhanced customer satisfaction and loyalty, but it also established my personal relationships as essential components of Chen Textiles' customer retention and business development. The combination of proprietary technologies protected by individual patents, exclusive supplier relationships based on personal expertise, and direct customer relationships centered on technical problem-solving created a foundation of strategic assets that existed independently of Chen Textiles' traditional business operations. My family continued to view the company's competitive advantages in terms of reputation, production capabilities, and established market position. They did not recognize that the innovations driving our improved performance and expanded market opportunities were actually controlled by someone they considered an administrative coordinator rather than a strategic contributor. This misalignment between perception and reality would eventually create the dramatic revelation that shocked my family during the acquisition announcement. But first, I needed to continue building the strategic asset portfolio that would eventually prove who was actually responsible for Chen Textiles' most valuable capabilities. The crisis that would ultimately force my hand and accelerate my timeline for securing legal control began on a rainy Thursday morning in March, when our largest customer, Pacific Athletic Wear, delivered an ultimatum that exposed fundamental weaknesses in my family's approach to business strategy and competitive positioning. Rebecca Martinez, Pacific Athletics Director of Product Development, arrived at our Pearl District facility for what we had assumed would be a routine quarterly business review. Pacific Athletic represented 32% of Chen Textiles' annual revenue, generating approximately $4 million in fabric purchases for their line of performance athletic wear sold throughout the western United States. The relationship had been established 8 years earlier, when Pacific Athletic was a smaller regional company seeking reliable suppliers for their expanding operations. My father had cultivated the partnership through consistent delivery performance and competitive pricing, viewing Pacific Athletic as a cornerstone account that validated Chen Textile's position in the performance textile market. However, the meeting that morning revealed that Pacific Athletic's requirements had evolved far beyond our current capabilities. Rebecca spread fabric samples across our conference table, displaying materials that demonstrated technical properties we could not replicate with our existing production processes or supplier relationships. These samples represent the minimum performance standards we need for our next-generation product line, Rebecca explained, her tone professional but uncompromising. Moisture-wicking efficiency needs to be at least 40% better than current industry standards. Antimicrobial properties must demonstrate 90% reduction in bacterial growth after 50 wash cycles. Color fastness requirements have increased to accommodate new dyeing techniques that our design team wants to implement. My father examined the samples carefully, his expression revealing the concern he was trying to conceal. These technical specifications exceeded anything Chen Textiles had previously produced, requiring innovations in both material science and manufacturing processes that would represent significant departures from our established operations. Daniel, who had joined the company full-time 6 months earlier as Director of Business Development, attempted to project confidence, despite his limited technical knowledge. "We appreciate Pacific Athletic's commitment to innovation," he said. "Chen Textiles has always been willing to invest in new capabilities to meet our customers' evolving requirements." Rebecca's response was direct and unforgiving. "I need to be clear about our timeline and expectations. Pacific Athletic has identified 3 potential suppliers who can meet these technical specifications. We are prepared to consolidate our entire fabric sourcing with whichever supplier can demonstrate reliable production of materials meeting these performance standards by September 1st. Quote, "The implications were immediate and devastating. September 1st was 5 months away. Barely sufficient time to develop new production capabilities under ideal circumstances. The technical specifications Rebecca had outlined would require research and development work that could take years to complete successfully, assuming we could access the expertise and resources necessary for such ambitious innovation. More critically, Pacific Athletic's ultimatum represented an all-or-nothing proposition. We would either secure their expanded business by demonstrating breakthrough technical capabilities, or we would lose their account entirely as they consolidated with suppliers who could meet their performance requirements. The loss of Pacific Athletic would reduce Chen Textiles' annual revenue by 1/3, creating immediate cash flow problems and potentially triggering covenant violations on our bank credit facilities. The financial impact would force layoffs, facility downsizing, and strategic retreats that could permanently damage our competitive position in the performance textile market." My father scheduled a family meeting for that evening to discuss our response to Pacific Athletic's challenge. The gathering took place in his home office, surrounded by industry awards and family photographs that represented decades of steady business growth and financial success. "This is our most significant strategic challenge in 20 years, Michael began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood that his business legacy was at stake. "Pacific Athletic's requirements are beyond our current technical capabilities, but losing their account would threaten everything we have built." Daniel had prepared a preliminary analysis of our options, though his recommendations revealed the limitations of his consulting background when applied to complex manufacturing challenges. "We could potentially partner with a materials science company that has the research capabilities we lack," he suggested. "Alternatively, we might consider acquiring specialized equipment that could enable the production processes Pacific Athletic requires." Linda, my stepmother, offered her perspective from a marketing standpoint. "Perhaps we should focus on diversifying our customer base so that we are not so dependent on any single account. Pacific Athletic's requirements seem unreasonably demanding given the timeline they have established." The discussion continued for nearly 2 hours, but none of the proposed solutions addressed the fundamental technical challenges that Pacific Athletic's specifications represented. Partnership discussions would require months of negotiation and due diligence. Equipment acquisition would require capital investments we could not afford, and technical expertise we did not possess. Customer diversification would require years of business development work that would not resolve our immediate crisis. I listened to these conversations with growing frustration, recognizing that my family was approaching the challenge with strategies that were inadequate for the technical complexity involved. More importantly, I realized that I possessed solutions to Pacific Athletics requirements that my family did not know existed. The 3 patents I had filed over the previous 18 months covered textile treatment processes that could meet or exceed every technical specification Rebecca had outlined. The moisture wicking treatment I had developed could improve performance by 47% compared to industry standards. My antimicrobial process achieved 94% bacterial reduction after 100 wash cycles. The dyeing modifications I had patented could enhance color fastness while enabling the innovative design techniques Pacific Athletic wanted to implement. However, revealing my patent portfolio would require explaining 3 years of clandestine research and development work that my family had never authorized or acknowledged. The disclosure would transform their understanding of my role at Chen Textiles and potentially create conflicts around intellectual property ownership and business control that could fracture family relationships permanently. That night, I faced the most difficult decision of my professional life. I could remain silent about my innovations and allow Chen Textiles to pursue inadequate solutions that would likely fail, preserving family harmony while watching our most important customer relationship collapse. Alternatively, I could reveal my technical capabilities and offer solutions that would secure Pacific Athletics' business, but at the cost of exposing the strategic foundation I had been building for eventual independence. The decision was complicated by my growing awareness that Pacific Athletics' ultimatum represented an opportunity as well as a crisis. If I could demonstrate that my innovations were essential for meeting their requirements, I would establish my technical expertise as indispensable to Chen Textiles' competitive position. The leverage created by this demonstration could enable negotiations around my role, compensation, and equity participation that would otherwise be impossible. More importantly, successful resolution of Pacific Athletics' challenge would validate my approach to business development and innovation, potentially opening pathways to greater responsibility and strategic influence within the company. If my family could recognize the value of my contributions under crisis conditions, they might reconsider their assumptions about my capabilities and long-term potential. I scheduled a meeting with my father for the following Monday morning, ostensibly to discuss administrative support for whatever strategic response the company would pursue. However, I intended to present a comprehensive solution to Pacific Athletics' requirements that would demonstrate capabilities my family had never suspected I possessed. The weekend provided time to prepare technical documentation that would support my presentation. I compiled performance test results for all 3 of my patented treatment processes, including comparative analysis showing how they exceeded Pacific Athletics specifications. I prepared production feasibility studies demonstrating that the treatments could be implemented using our existing manufacturing infrastructure with minimal capital investment. I developed financial projections showing how meeting Pacific Athletics requirements could increase our profit margins by 28%, while potentially attracting similar business from other performance textile customers. Most critically, I prepared legal documentation, establishing my individual ownership of the intellectual property that would enable Chen Textiles to secure Pacific Athletics' expanded business. The patents were filed under my name, and the treatment processes were protected by trade secrets that I controlled exclusively. Any commercial application of these technologies would require my direct involvement and could not be transferred to other personnel without my cooperation. Monday morning arrived with the kind of spring sunshine that makes Portland feel like the most optimistic city in America. I walked into my father's office carrying a presentation folder that contained 3 years of systematic preparation for a moment I had hoped would occur under different circumstances. Michael was reviewing correspondence from our bank, presumably related to credit facility conditions that Pacific Athletics' ultimatum had made suddenly relevant. His expression suggested that the weekend had not provided any breakthrough insights into viable solutions for our strategic challenge. "Sophia," he said, looking up from the financial documents spread across his desk, "I appreciate you taking time to discuss how we can best coordinate our response to Pacific Athletics requirements. This situation requires the most careful planning and execution we have ever undertaken." I opened my presentation folder and placed the first document on his desk. It was a technical summary of 3 proprietary textile treatment processes that could meet or exceed every specification Pacific Athletic had outlined, accompanied by performance test results that demonstrated measurable superiority to current industry standards. My father examined the document with growing surprise, his expression shifting from confusion to amazement as he processed the technical data and performance metrics. "Sophia, where did this information come from? These treatment processes are exactly what we need to meet Pacific Athletics requirements." "I developed them," I said simply. "Over the past 18 months using our production facilities during evenings and weekends. The processes are protected by 3 separate patents filed under my name, and the trade secrets are documented in my personal laboratory notebooks." The silence that followed was unlike any I had experienced in family business discussions. Michael stared at the technical documentation as if it contained information that challenged his fundamental understanding of reality. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a mixture of astonishment and something that might have been pride. "You developed these technologies independently, without any assistance or external consultation?" "The development work was entirely independent," I confirmed. "I used my background in chemical engineering and my access to production facilities to conduct systematic experiments that identified treatment processes meeting specific performance criteria. The patent applications include detailed technical specifications and prior art analysis that establish the innovations as commercially viable and legally protected." Quote, I placed the second document on his desk, a production feasibility study demonstrating how the patented treatments could be implemented using Chen Textile's existing manufacturing infrastructure. The analysis showed that minimal capital investment would be required, primarily consisting of specialized chemicals and minor equipment modifications that could be completed within 6 weeks. "Implementation timeline?" Michael asked, his business instincts taking precedence over his surprise at the source of these solutions. "Production trials can begin immediately," I replied. "Full-scale manufacturing capability can be established by July 15th, providing adequate margin to meet Pacific Athletics' September 1st deadline. The processes are scalable and can accommodate increased production volumes if Pacific Athletics' business expands as projected." The third document was a financial analysis, showing how the enhanced performance characteristics enabled by my patented treatments would justify premium pricing that could increase profit margins significantly. The projections demonstrated that Pacific Athletics' expanded business could generate 40% higher profitability per yard of fabric produced, while also creating competitive advantages that could attract additional customers in performance textile markets. Michael studied the financial projections with the focused attention of someone who recognized that these numbers could transform Chen Textile's strategic position and long-term prospects. "These margins are substantially higher than our current performance textile business. How confident are you in these projections?" "The pricing analysis is based on market research conducted with 3 other performance textile customers who have expressed interest in enhanced material properties," I explained. "The premium pricing is justified by measurable performance improvements that reduce their manufacturing costs and enhance their product differentiation." The conversation continued for another hour as Michael asked detailed questions about technical specifications, implementation requirements, and competitive implications. His questions revealed both genuine curiosity about the innovations I had developed and growing recognition that my technical capabilities far exceeded anything he had previously understood or acknowledged. However, the most significant moment came when he asked about intellectual property ownership and licensing arrangements. "Sophia, these patents represent extraordinary value for Chen Textiles. How do we proceed with securing rights to use these technologies for Pacific Athletics requirements?" The question created the opening I had been preparing for throughout 3 years of systematic innovation and strategic planning. The patents are filed under my individual name, and the treatment processes are protected by trade secrets that I control exclusively. Any commercial application would require licensing agreements that establish terms for my participation in the resulting business value. Michael's expression suggested he was beginning to understand that his daughter's contributions to Chen Textiles extended far beyond administrative coordination. The technical innovations spread across his desk represented competitive advantages that could secure not only Pacific Athletics' business, but potentially transform the company's position in performance textile markets. More importantly, he was recognizing that these advantages were controlled by someone whose role and compensation had never reflected her actual contributions to the company's strategic capabilities. The crisis created by Pacific Athletics' ultimatum had revealed that Chen Textile's most valuable assets were owned by the family member who had been consistently overlooked in succession planning and strategic decision-making. What happened next would determine whether my family could adapt to this new reality, or whether my carefully constructed foundation for independence would become the basis for a complete separation from the business they thought they controlled. The 48 hours following my revelation to my father represented the most critical decision point in my professional life. I had demonstrated that I possessed the technical solutions required to secure Pacific Athletics' business and potentially transform Chen Textile's competitive position. However, leveraging these capabilities would require fundamental changes to my role, compensation, and decision-making authority within the family business structure. My father had requested time to review my technical documentation and discuss the implications with Daniel and our family attorney. The request was reasonable from a business perspective, but it also created uncertainty about whether my family would recognize the strategic value of my contributions or attempt to minimize their significance through alternative explanations or diminished expectations. During this waiting period, I conducted comprehensive analysis of my negotiating position and developed multiple scenarios for how discussions might proceed. The intellectual property portfolio I had created provided substantial leverage, but successfully converting this leverage into meaningful business authority would require careful strategic thinking and disciplined execution. The first scenario involved my family acknowledging my technical contributions and offering increased responsibility within the existing organizational structure. This outcome would provide greater recognition and potentially higher compensation, but it would not address fundamental issues around decision-making authority and long-term equity participation. I would remain dependent on family approval for strategic initiatives, and vulnerable to changes in family dynamics that could affect my position. The second scenario involved my family proposing licensing arrangements that would provide financial compensation for my patents while maintaining their control over business operations and strategic direction. This approach would generate immediate income and formal recognition of my intellectual property value, but it would also limit my ability to influence how the technologies were developed and commercialized over time. The third scenario, which I considered most likely given my family's traditional approach to business relationships, involved attempts to minimize the significance of my contributions through suggestions that the innovations were extensions of existing company capabilities rather than independent intellectual property developments. This response would preserve established authority structures while failing to address the fundamental changes in competitive positioning that my technologies enabled. However, I had also prepared for a fourth scenario that represented the most advantageous outcome from my perspective, though it would require more aggressive negotiation tactics and potentially create significant family conflict. This approach involved establishing my patents and related capabilities as the foundation for a strategic partnership between myself and Chen Textiles, rather than traditional employee-employer relationships. Under this partnership structure, I would maintain ownership and control of the intellectual property that enabled Chen Textile's most valuable competitive advantages, while contributing these capabilities in exchange for significant equity participation and strategic decision-making authority. The arrangement would align my interests with the company's long-term success, while ensuring that my contributions were appropriately recognized and compensated. Preparing for these negotiations required detailed financial analysis of Chen Textile's current valuation and projected performance with and without my technical innovations. I worked with an independent business appraiser to establish baseline valuations using traditional metrics, then developed enhanced projections that incorporated the competitive advantages and premium pricing opportunities my patents would enable. The baseline valuation, based on Chen Textile's historical financial performance and industry comparison metrics, established the company's worth at approximately $14 million. This figure reflected steady profitability and established customer relationships, but it did not account for growth opportunities or differentiated competitive positioning. The enhanced valuation, incorporating projected revenues from Pacific Athletics' expanded business and similar opportunities with other performance textile customers, suggested Chen Textiles could be worth $28 to $35 million within 3 years. The increase was directly attributable to intellectual property that I owned individually, and capabilities that required my ongoing involvement to maintain and develop. This analysis demonstrated that my patents represented between $14 and $21 million in potential value creation, figures that justified significant equity participation and strategic authority regardless of traditional family business succession expectations. The mathematics of value creation provided objective support for negotiating positions that might otherwise be dismissed as unrealistic or presumptuous. I also prepared detailed documentation of my supplier relationships and customer connections that had become essential to Chen Textiles' operations over the previous 3 years. The analysis revealed that I had become the primary technical contact for 68% of our customer base and maintained exclusive relationships with 7 critical suppliers who provided specialized materials required for our most profitable product lines. These relationships represented strategic assets that existed independently of Chen Textiles' traditional business operations, similar to my patent portfolio. Any attempt to transfer these relationships to other personnel would require extensive transition periods and would likely result in reduced effectiveness and potentially lost business. The combination of intellectual property ownership, essential supplier relationships, and critical customer connections created a strategic asset portfolio that made my continued involvement indispensable to Chen Textiles' competitive position and growth prospects. This portfolio provided negotiating leverage that extended far beyond my technical expertise or administrative capabilities. On Wednesday morning, my father requested a family meeting to discuss my proposals and establish the framework for moving forward with Pacific Athletics requirements. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at his home office, with Daniel, Linda, and our family attorney, Robert Kim, participating in the discussion. I prepared comprehensive presentation materials that would support my negotiating position, while demonstrating my commitment to Chen Textiles' success and family harmony. The presentation balanced assertive advocacy for my interests with collaborative problem-solving approaches that would enable win-win outcomes for all parties involved. The presentation began with analysis of Pacific Athletics requirements and competitive implications, establishing the urgency and significance of the strategic challenge we faced. I documented how losing Pacific Athletics business would affect Chen Textiles' financial position and market reputation, creating context for evaluating potential solutions and their associated costs and benefits. The second section presented my technical solutions in detail, including performance specifications, implementation timelines, and production feasibility analysis. I provided evidence that my patented treatments exceeded Pacific Athletics requirements and could potentially attract additional customers with similar performance needs. The third section addressed intellectual property ownership and licensing considerations, presenting multiple options for how my patents could be utilized while protecting both my interests and Chen Textiles' strategic objectives. I proposed partnership structures that would align incentives and ensure continued innovation development while maintaining family business values and relationships. The final section outlined financial projections and equity considerations, demonstrating how my contributions could enhance Chen Textiles' valuation and create sustainable competitive advantages. I presented scenarios showing how different partnership arrangements would affect returns for all stakeholders, emphasizing outcomes that would benefit the entire family while appropriately recognizing my value creation. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of clarity that follows significant rainfall, washing Portland's spring air clean and creating conditions that seemed appropriate for important conversations. I arrived at my father's house carrying presentation materials and legal documentation that represented 3 years of systematic preparation for this moment. The meeting began with Robert Kim's review of my patent filings and their implications for Chen Textiles' competitive position. His analysis confirmed that my intellectual property was properly filed and legally protected, and that any commercial application would require licensing agreements with terms that I would control. Sophia's patent portfolio represents significant strategic assets, Robert explained to the family. These technologies could provide Chen Textiles with sustainable competitive advantages, but they also create dependencies that must be addressed through appropriate business arrangements. My father's response revealed his growing understanding of how fundamentally the situation had changed. We need to secure access to these technologies to maintain our competitive position. particularly given Pacific Athletics' requirements and timeline. What options should we consider for establishing appropriate licensing relationships? I presented the partnership proposal I had developed, emphasizing how it would align my interests with Chen Textile's long-term success, while ensuring continued innovation development and competitive positioning. The proposal included immediate licensing of my existing patents, ongoing research and development responsibilities, and equity participation that would reflect the value I was contributing to the business. Daniel's response was more defensive, reflecting his concern about how my increased role might affect his own position and advancement opportunities. This seems like a significant departure from traditional family business structures, he said. We should consider whether there are alternative approaches that could secure the technical capabilities we need without creating such complex partnership arrangements. Linda's perspective focused on family dynamics and potential conflicts that might result from changing established relationships and expectations. I appreciate Sophia's contributions, but we need to consider how these changes might affect family harmony and long-term relationships. Business partnerships between family members can create complications that are difficult to resolve. The discussion continued for nearly 3 hours, covering technical details, financial implications, and family considerations. However, the fundamental issue remained unchanged. Chen Textiles required access to my intellectual property and technical expertise to secure Pacific Athletics' business and maintain competitive positioning, while traditional employment relationships would not provide appropriate recognition or compensation for the value I was creating. Robert Kim's legal analysis supported my position while addressing family concerns about complexity and potential conflicts. Partnership structures can be designed to protect all parties' interests, while providing appropriate incentives for continued value creation, he explained. The key is establishing clear agreements that define responsibilities, decision-making authority, and financial arrangements. As the evening progressed, it became apparent that my family was beginning to accept that traditional approaches to my role and compensation would not address the strategic realities created by my patent portfolio and technical capabilities. The question was no longer whether arrangements would change, but how changes could be structured to benefit everyone involved. My father ultimately requested additional time to review partnership proposals and discuss implementation details with Robert Kim. However, his closing comments suggested that he understood the necessity of adapting to new circumstances while preserving family relationships and business objectives. Sophia, your contributions have exceeded anything we anticipated when you joined the company, he said. We need to find arrangements that appropriately recognize your value while ensuring Chen Textiles can continue growing and succeeding as a family business. The meeting concluded with agreement to reconvene the following week after legal review of partnership structures and financial analysis of various arrangement options. However, I recognized that the fundamental decision had already been made. My family had acknowledged that I controlled strategic assets essential to Chen Textiles' future success, and they were committed to establishing arrangements that would secure continued access to these capabilities. Over the weekend, I reflected on how dramatically my position had changed within the span of 1 week. The crisis created by Pacific Athletics' ultimatum had forced recognition of capabilities that my family had overlooked for 3 years. The intellectual property portfolio I had developed in secret had become the foundation for negotiating strategic authority and equity participation that would have been impossible to achieve through traditional advancement channels. Most importantly, I had demonstrated that systematic preparation and strategic thinking could create opportunities that transcended limitations imposed by family dynamics or traditional business structures. The patents I had filed during evenings and weekends had become bargaining chips that could reshape my entire professional trajectory. The decision to pursue aggressive negotiation rather than accepting incremental recognition represented a fundamental choice between safety and growth, between accommodation and assertion. I could have accepted increased responsibility within existing structures, maintaining family harmony while limiting my long-term potential. Instead, I chose to leverage my strategic advantages fully, accepting the risks associated with challenging established expectations and relationships. This choice reflected lessons I had learned about the difference between being valuable and being valued. My technical contributions had always been valuable to Chen Textiles' competitive position, but they had not been valued appropriately because my family did not understand their significance. The crisis had created conditions where value and valuation could finally be aligned through appropriate business arrangements. The upcoming negotiations would determine whether my strategic foundation could support the business authority and equity participation. I believed my contributions justified. During this negotiation period, Meridian Industries increased competitive pressure through multiple approaches designed to disrupt our operations and strategic development. They recruited 2 of our production supervisors by offering salary increases that we could not match, initiated patent challenges against our treatment processes, and approached several of our customers with aggressive pricing proposals that would undercut our margins significantly. The competitive response required systematic counter-strategies that would protect our operational capabilities while demonstrating to customers and suppliers that Chen Textiles remained committed to innovation, leadership, and service excellence. I coordinated with Maria Gonzalez to implement retention programs for critical personnel, while Daniel developed customer communication strategies that emphasized our unique value propositions and competitive advantages. The patent challenges required specialized legal expertise and significant financial resources to defend our intellectual property rights through complex regulatory proceedings. Robert Kim engaged patent litigation specialists who had experience with similar cases, while I documented additional technical evidence that would support our intellectual property claims and demonstrate the novelty of our innovations. The customer retention efforts proved most challenging because Meridian's pricing proposals were subsidized by their larger financial resources and designed to eliminate our competitive advantages through predatory practices. However, our established relationships and superior technical performance provided defensive capabilities that prevented significant customer defections while we developed long-term competitive responses. The competitive pressure from Meridian Industries ultimately strengthened Chen Textiles' strategic position by forcing acceleration of expansion programs and partnership development that might otherwise have proceeded more gradually. The external threat created internal alignment around aggressive growth objectives, while demonstrating to potential partners that Chen Textiles represented valuable strategic assets worthy of significant investment and support. When the Western Sports Partnership Agreement was finalized in December, Chen Textiles had evolved from a regional manufacturer facing competitive threats to a strategic supplier with guaranteed revenue, substantial growth capital, and exclusive access to multiple market opportunities. The transformation had required 8 months of intensive strategic development and competitive maneuvering, but the outcome positioned us for continued growth and innovation leadership. The partnership announcement generated industry attention that validated our strategic approach while establishing Chen Textiles as a recognized leader in performance textile innovation. Trade publications featured our collaboration with Western Sports as an example of successful strategic alliances between manufacturers and brand companies, while competitors acknowledged that our competitive position had been strengthened significantly. Most importantly, the successful navigation of Meridian's competitive challenges demonstrated that systematic strategic thinking and coordinated execution could enable smaller companies to compete effectively against much larger industry players. The experience provided confidence and expertise that would support future competitive challenges while establishing frameworks for continued growth and innovation development. The foundation I had built through patent development and strategic relationship management had enabled Chen Textiles to transform competitive threats into growth opportunities, proving that individual capabilities, when properly supported and strategically applied, could create organizational advantages that transcended resource limitations and traditional competitive constraints. The strategic partnership with Western Sports Enterprises fundamentally altered the relationship dynamics within Chen Textiles and throughout our extended business network. The $10 million investment and exclusive supplier arrangement established me as the primary interface between our companies, while simultaneously creating internal tensions around authority, decision-making processes, and long-term strategic direction that required careful navigation to maintain family cohesion and operational effectiveness. The most significant relationship transformation occurred with my brother Daniel, whose role as Director of Business Development had evolved from heir apparent to strategic partner in ways that challenged his expectations and required substantial adjustment in his approach to family business leadership. The supplier coordination required expanding our chemical inventory to include specialized materials needed for the treatment processes, while establishing quality control procedures that would ensure consistent application and performance characteristics. I leveraged my existing relationships with key suppliers to secure preferential pricing and delivery schedules for the additional materials, demonstrating how my strategic asset portfolio created operational advantages that extended beyond intellectual property ownership. The most critical aspect of implementation was establishing quality control systems that could verify treatment effectiveness and ensure that finished products met Pacific Athletics' exacting performance specifications. I developed testing protocols that measured moisture wicking efficiency, antimicrobial properties, and color fastness according to industry standards, while also implementing statistical process control methods that would identify variations before they affected product quality. Within 6 weeks, we had successfully established production capabilities for all 3 treatment processes, with initial batch testing demonstrating performance characteristics that exceeded Pacific Athletics' minimum requirements. The implementation success validated my technical expertise while proving that systematic innovation could be integrated with existing manufacturing operations without disrupting productivity or quality. The first production samples were delivered to Pacific Athletic in early May, approximately 3 weeks ahead of their requested timeline. Rebecca Martinez conducted comprehensive performance testing using their internal laboratory facilities and independent third-party analysis, comparing our enhanced fabrics against materials from competing suppliers who were also pursuing their expanded business. The results exceeded my most optimistic projections. The moisture wicking efficiency of our treated fabrics measured 47% better than industry standards, compared to Pacific Athletics' minimum requirement of 40% improvement. The antimicrobial treatment achieved 96% bacterial reduction after 100 wash cycles, significantly surpassing their specification of 90% reduction after 50 cycles. Most importantly, the color fastness and durability characteristics of our treated fabrics demonstrated superior performance compared to synthetic alternatives that cost significantly more to produce. Pacific Athletics' analysis confirmed that Chen Textiles could provide enhanced performance characteristics at competitive pricing, creating value propositions that their other potential suppliers could not match. Rebecca's response to our sample delivery was both professionally enthusiastic and strategically significant. Chen Textiles has demonstrated technical capabilities that exceed our requirements while maintaining the reliability and quality standards that have made our partnership successful, she informed my father during a conference call that included the entire Chen family leadership team. Based on these results, Pacific Athletic is prepared to award Chen Textiles exclusive supplier status for our performance textile requirements, with projected annual volumes that could reach $6 million within 18 months, Rebecca continued. We are also interested in discussing collaboration opportunities for developing additional performance enhancements that could differentiate our products in competitive markets. The Pacific Athletic success created immediate validation of my strategic approach and technical capabilities, while also demonstrating the financial potential of innovation-driven business development. The projected revenue increase would enhance Chen Textiles' profitability by approximately 35%, with higher margins than our traditional manufacturing operations generated. However, the most significant outcome was not financial performance, but rather the recognition that Chen Textiles had evolved from a regional manufacturer serving established markets to an innovation leader capable of developing proprietary technologies that created sustainable competitive advantages. This transformation positioned the company for expansion into new market segments and customer relationships that had previously been inaccessible. My role as Chief Technology Officer expanded beyond managing existing innovations to include systematic development of additional proprietary technologies that could further enhance our competitive position. I established a formal research and development program with dedicated laboratory space, specialized equipment, and documentation systems that could support patent applications and commercial development. The R&D program focused on 3 strategic priorities that aligned with emerging market opportunities and our manufacturing capabilities. The first priority involved developing additional treatment processes that could enhance fabric performance characteristics in ways that would attract customers beyond the athletic apparel market. Medical textiles, industrial applications, and high-performance consumer products all represented potential markets for specialized fabric treatments. The second priority concentrated on improving production efficiency and cost-effectiveness through process innovations that could reduce manufacturing costs while maintaining or enhancing product quality. These innovations would strengthen our competitive position by enabling better pricing while preserving profit margins, particularly important for competing against international manufacturers with lower labor costs. The third priority explored emerging technologies, including smart textiles and electronic integration, that could create entirely new product categories and market opportunities. While these applications were more speculative than immediate performance enhancements, they represented potential breakthrough innovations that could establish Chen Textiles as a technology leader in advanced textile applications. The systematic approach to innovation development required establishing relationships with research institutions, technology companies, and industry organizations that could provide access to emerging technologies and market intelligence. I initiated collaborations with Portland State University's Materials Science Department and Oregon Health Sciences University's Textile Research Center, creating pathways for accessing academic expertise and student research capabilities. These academic partnerships provided multiple benefits, including access to specialized equipment and analytical capabilities that would be expensive for Chen Textiles to acquire independently, opportunities to recruit talented researchers who could contribute to our innovation programs, and potential intellectual property development that could enhance our patent portfolio and competitive positioning. The industry relationship development involved participating in textile technology conferences, joining professional organizations focused on performance materials, and establishing connections with companies developing complementary technologies that could create collaboration opportunities. These activities enhanced my professional reputation while creating business development opportunities that could benefit Chen Textiles' growth objectives. Within 3 months of assuming the Chief Technology Officer role, I had established Chen Textiles as a recognized participant in the performance textile innovation community. Industry publications began featuring our technical developments, and competitors started monitoring our patent filings and commercial activities as indicators of emerging market trends. The transformation was particularly evident during the annual Pacific Northwest Textile Technology Conference, where I presented research findings on antimicrobial treatment innovations that had generated significant interest from companies throughout the industry. The presentation demonstrated that Chen Textiles had evolved from a regional manufacturer to a technology developer, whose innovations were influencing industry standards and competitive strategies. The market recognition created new business development opportunities that extended far beyond our traditional customer base. Companies specializing in medical textiles, industrial applications, and specialty consumer products began approaching Chen Textiles about potential supplier relationships and technology licensing arrangements. One particularly promising opportunity emerged from discussions with Cascade Medical Products, a company that manufactured surgical drapes and sterile textiles for hospital systems throughout the western United States. Their Director of Product Development, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, had attended my conference presentation and was interested in exploring how our antimicrobial treatments could enhance infection control capabilities in medical applications. The initial conversations with Cascade Medical revealed that their current antimicrobial treatments were expensive and required specialized synthetic materials that limited their competitive positioning relative to international suppliers. My treatment processes could provide superior antimicrobial performance using standard cotton and polyester blends, creating cost advantages that could significantly enhance their market position. The potential collaboration with Cascade Medical represented exactly the type of strategic expansion that my innovation programs were designed to enable. By leveraging proprietary technologies to enter new market segments, Chen Textiles could diversify revenue sources while commanding premium pricing that traditional manufacturing approaches could not achieve. However, the most significant validation of my strategic approach came through recognition from my own family members, who had observed the dramatic transformation in Chen Textiles' competitive position and market reputation over the past 6 months. My father acknowledged that the innovation-focused strategy I had championed was generating results that exceeded his most optimistic expectations for business growth and profitability. Daniel's response was more complex, reflecting his adjustment to working alongside someone whose technical expertise and strategic authority had evolved significantly since his return to the company. However, his business development background enabled him to recognize the commercial value of the innovations I was developing and the market opportunities they were creating. Linda's perspective had shifted from skepticism about complex partnership arrangements to appreciation for the financial returns and strategic positioning that my contributions were generating. The success of the innovation programs had demonstrated that family business evolution could strengthen rather than complicate relationships when changes were managed appropriately. The partnership agreement that had initially seemed like a dramatic departure from traditional family business structures had proven to be an effective mechanism for aligning individual capabilities with organizational objectives. The arrangement had enabled recognition and compensation of my contributions while preserving family relationships and business continuity. Most importantly, the successful implementation of my first strategic initiatives as Chief Technology Officer had established credibility that would support future innovation programs and business development efforts. The foundation I had built through systematic preparation and strategic thinking was now supporting expanded opportunities that could transform Chen Textiles into the industry leader I had always believed it could become. The success of our Pacific Athletic contract and the rapid expansion of our innovation capabilities attracted attention that would fundamentally alter Chen Textiles' competitive landscape. Within 8 months of my appointment as Chief Technology Officer, 3 major industry players had attempted to recruit me directly, 2 competitors had begun reverse engineering our treatment processes to develop similar capabilities, and 1 international conglomerate had approached my father about acquiring Chen Textiles entirely. The first significant challenge emerged when Meridian Industries, a textile manufacturing conglomerate with annual revenues exceeding $200 million, offered me a position as Director of Advanced Materials Research at a salary that was nearly double my current compensation. The offer included relocation to their corporate headquarters in North Carolina, comprehensive research facilities, and a team of 12 researchers who would support development of next-generation textile technologies. Dr. Amanda Foster, Meridian's Chief Technology Officer, presented the opportunity during a private dinner meeting in Portland, emphasizing the resources and strategic support that a larger organization could provide for innovation development. Her approach was sophisticated and professionally compelling, demonstrating thorough research into my background and achievements at Chen Textiles. Sophia, your innovations in antimicrobial and moisture-wicking treatments represent breakthrough developments that could transform multiple market segments, Dr. Foster explained. Meridian Industries has the capital, infrastructure, and market relationships necessary to scale these technologies globally, creating opportunities for impact and compensation that smaller organizations cannot provide. The financial terms were extraordinary by any reasonable standard. The base salary alone exceeded my current total compensation package, while equity participation in Meridian's stock options program could generate substantial wealth if their expansion strategies succeeded. The research budget I would control was larger than Chen Textiles' entire annual revenue, providing access to equipment, materials, and personnel that would accelerate innovation development significantly. However, the most attractive aspect of Meridian's offer was not financial compensation but rather the potential for developing technologies that could impact millions of consumers rather than serving regional markets through a family business structure. The scale and scope of opportunities at Meridian represented the kind of platform that ambitious researchers typically required for achieving breakthrough innovations with global significance. I requested 2 weeks to consider the proposal, using this time to analyze the strategic implications for both my personal career development and Chen Textiles' competitive position. The decision would affect not only my immediate circumstances but also the long-term viability of the innovation programs I had established and the family relationships that had evolved through our partnership arrangements. The analysis revealed that accepting Meridian's offer would provide substantial personal benefits while potentially devastating Chen Textiles' competitive position and strategic prospects. My departure would eliminate access to the intellectual property that had enabled their performance textile success, while also removing the technical expertise and industry relationships that supported continued innovation development. More critically, my departure would occur at precisely the moment when Chen Textiles was positioned for significant expansion, based on the foundation I had established. The Pacific Athletic success had generated interest from 6 additional performance textile customers, while the medical textile opportunities I was developing with Cascade Medical could create entirely new revenue streams within 18 months. The decision required weighing personal advancement opportunities against family loyalty and business commitments that extended beyond formal contractual obligations. The partnership agreement I had negotiated included provisions that would allow my departure under specific circumstances, but exercising these options would effectively end Chen Textile's prospects for continued growth and innovation leadership. During this evaluation period, I discovered that Meridian's interest in my capabilities was accompanied by broader strategic intentions regarding Chen Textiles itself. Through industry sources and legal research, I learned that Meridian had been monitoring our patent filings and market activities for several months, while also conducting preliminary assessment of our customer relationships and operational capabilities. The recruitment offer appeared to be the initial phase of a strategy designed to acquire Chen Textile's most valuable assets through talent acquisition, potentially followed by competitive pressure that could force my family to consider selling the remaining business at reduced valuations. This approach would enable Meridian to gain control of our innovations and market position, while avoiding the premium pricing that direct acquisition would require. Understanding Meridian's broader strategic intentions transformed my evaluation of their recruitment offer from a career decision to a competitive challenge that required comprehensive response strategies. Simply declining their offer would not address the underlying threat they represented to Chen Textile's independence and long-term viability. I scheduled a family meeting to discuss these developments and develop coordinated responses that would protect our competitive position, while positioning Chen Textiles for continued growth despite increased industry attention. The meeting included my father, Daniel, and Robert Kim, with additional participation from Maria Gonzalez, whose operational expertise had become essential for implementing our expanded innovation programs. Meridian Industries represents both validation of our strategic direction and a significant competitive threat, I explained to the assembled group. Their interest in recruiting me reflects recognition that our innovation capabilities have achieved industry-leading status. However, their broader strategic intentions suggest plans for acquiring our technologies and market position through means that could undermine our independence. My father's response demonstrated his growing sophistication in evaluating competitive dynamics and strategic threats. If Meridian considers our capabilities valuable enough to justify aggressive recruitment efforts, other industry players are likely conducting similar assessments. We need comprehensive strategies for protecting our competitive advantages while accelerating growth that would make acquisition attempts prohibitively expensive. The strategic planning that emerged from this meeting established Chen Textile's evolution from regional manufacturer to industry innovator as an explicit organizational objective, with specific milestones and resource commitments that would support systematic expansion of our capabilities and market position. The plan included 3 primary components designed to strengthen our competitive position, while creating barriers to predatory acquisition attempts. The first component involved accelerating patent development to establish comprehensive intellectual property protection for our innovations and related technologies. I proposed expanding our research and development program to include 4 additional researchers, specialized laboratory equipment, and collaboration agreements with 3 universities that could support advanced materials research. This expansion would enable development of second-generation treatment processes that would maintain our technological leadership while creating additional revenue streams through licensing arrangements with companies that were not direct competitors. The enhanced patent portfolio would also increase Chen Textile's valuation and make acquisition attempts more expensive and complex. The second component focused on geographic expansion that would reduce our dependence on regional markets while establishing national customer relationships that would strengthen our competitive position. Daniel proposed systematic business development efforts targeting performance textile customers in California, Texas, and the southeastern United States, supported by marketing programs that would establish Chen Textiles as a preferred supplier for companies requiring innovative fabric technologies. The geographic expansion would require additional sales personnel and potentially satellite facilities that could provide local service and support for distant customers. However, the investment would diversify our revenue sources while creating operational scale that would support continued innovation development and competitive positioning. The third component involved vertical integration that would provide greater control over critical materials and production processes while reducing costs and improving quality control. I identified 3 suppliers whose capabilities were essential for our treatment processes and whose acquisition would strengthen our competitive position while creating barriers for competitors attempting to replicate our innovations. The vertical integration strategy would require significant capital investment and operational complexity, But it would also create sustainable competitive advantages that would be difficult for larger competitors to overcome through scale or resource advantages alone. The integrated operations would enable proprietary control over the entire production process, from raw materials to finished products. Implementation of this comprehensive strategic plan would require capital resources that exceeded Chen Textile's current cash flow and borrowing capacity. The expansion programs would cost approximately $4 million over 18 months, requiring external financing that would need to be secured while maintaining family control and strategic independence. Robert Kim coordinated discussions with 3 investment banking firms that specialized in manufacturing company growth financing, evaluating options that included traditional bank loans, private equity partnerships, and revenue-based financing arrangements that would not require equity dilution or external management control. The financing discussions revealed that Chen Textile's enhanced competitive position and growth prospects had attracted significant investor interest, with multiple groups expressing willingness to provide capital for expansion programs at favorable terms. The company's improved financial performance and proprietary technology portfolio had eliminated many of the risks that typically concerned investors in manufacturing businesses. However, the most attractive financing option emerged from an unexpected source when Pacific Athletics' parent company, Western Sports Enterprises, proposed a strategic partnership that would provide both capital and market access for Chen Textile's expansion programs. Western Sports controlled multiple athletic apparel brands throughout North America and required reliable sources of innovative textile technologies for their product development initiatives. The strategic partnership proposal included a $10 million investment in exchange for exclusive supplier relationships and technology licensing arrangements that would provide Chen Textiles with guaranteed revenue while funding expansion programs. The arrangement would also include joint development programs for next-generation performance materials that could strengthen both companies' competitive positions. The Western Sports Partnership represented exactly the type of strategic alliance that would enable Chen Textiles to compete effectively against larger industry players while maintaining independence and family control. The relationship would provide access to resources and market opportunities that would have been impossible to achieve through internal development alone. Negotiations with Western Sports required 3 months of due diligence, legal documentation, and strategic planning that established frameworks for collaboration while protecting both companies' competitive interests. The complexity exceeded anything Chen Textiles had previously undertaken, requiring external legal counsel and financial advisory services that demonstrated how significantly our business sophistication had evolved. The Western Sports Partnership had elevated my position within the organization while demonstrating that technical expertise and innovation capabilities had become more valuable than traditional business development skills for driving competitive advantage and revenue growth. Daniel's initial response reflected the complexity of adjusting to circumstances where his sister had become the primary driver of business success and strategic direction. During our first quarterly review meeting following the partnership announcement, he expressed concerns about the concentration of critical business relationships under my direct management and the potential risks this created for organizational stability and succession planning. Sophia's technical capabilities have obviously been instrumental in securing our current competitive position, Daniel acknowledged during the family meeting. However, the extent to which our key customer relationships and strategic partnerships depend on her individual expertise creates potential vulnerabilities that we should address through more distributed responsibility and backup systems. His perspective was professionally reasonable and reflected legitimate concerns about organizational risk management and business continuity planning. However, I recognize that his comments also reflected personal frustration with the dramatic shift in family business dynamics that had occurred over the previous 18 months, transforming him from presumed successor to supporting partner in strategic initiatives that I controlled. My father's response demonstrated the wisdom and emotional intelligence that had enabled him to lead Chen Textiles successfully for 25 years, while maintaining family relationships through periods of significant change and challenge. Rather than dismissing either perspective, he facilitated discussions that addressed both operational concerns and relationship dynamics in ways that supported business objectives while preserving family harmony. Both perspectives contain important insights that should inform our organizational development, my father observed. Sophia's expertise and relationships have become essential strategic assets that must be protected and leveraged effectively. Simultaneously, Daniel's concerns about distributed responsibility and succession planning reflect prudent business management principles that will become increasingly important as we continue growing. The solution that emerged from these discussions involved establishing complementary roles that would utilize both Daniel's business development expertise and my technical capabilities, while creating shared responsibility for strategic initiatives and customer relationships. Daniel would assume primary responsibility for geographic expansion and new market development, while I would continue leading innovation programs and managing our most technically complex customer relationships. This arrangement required developing comprehensive communication protocols and decision-making frameworks that would ensure coordination between our respective areas of responsibility, while avoiding conflicts or duplicated efforts that could confuse customers or compromise operational efficiency. We established weekly strategy meetings and quarterly comprehensive reviews that would maintain alignment and enable collaborative problem-solving for challenges that spanned both technical and business development domains. The relationship evolution with Daniel ultimately strengthened both our individual capabilities and our collective effectiveness as business partners. His concerns about organizational risk had prompted development of documentation and training programs that reduced our dependence on individual expertise while maintaining competitive advantages. My commitment to collaborative leadership had enhanced trust and communication that enabled more sophisticated strategic planning and execution. However, the most challenging relationship dynamic involved my stepmother, Linda, whose position within the family business structure had become increasingly ambiguous as my strategic importance and decision-making authority expanded. Linda's background in marketing communications had provided valuable contributions during earlier phases of Chen Textile's development, but her expertise was less relevant for the innovation-driven strategy that had become our primary competitive advantage. Linda's concerns focused on the rapid pace of change and the complex partnership arrangements that had transformed Chen Textiles from a traditional family business into a strategic supplier, with sophisticated external relationships and substantial growth capital. She expressed worries that these changes might compromise family control and create dependencies that could threaten long-term independence and financial security. The partnership with Western Sports provides significant opportunities, but it also creates obligations and expectations that could limit our flexibility and decision-making autonomy, Linda observed during a family dinner discussion. We should ensure that growth initiatives do not compromise the values and relationships that have made Chen Textiles successful over 3 generations. Her perspective reflected legitimate concerns about maintaining organizational culture and family values during periods of rapid expansion and strategic transformation. However, her comments also revealed underlying anxiety about her own position within an increasingly technical and strategically complex business environment, where her contributions were less central to competitive success and operational effectiveness. I recognized that addressing Linda's concerns required demonstrating respect for her perspective while explaining how our strategic evolution actually strengthened rather than threatened the family values and long-term objectives that she wanted to protect. The conversation required diplomatic skills and emotional intelligence that complemented the technical expertise that had driven my professional advancement. The partnerships and innovation programs we have developed are designed to ensure Chen Textile's independence and competitive strength for the next generation, I explained. Rather than creating dependencies, these initiatives provide us with resources and capabilities that larger competitors cannot easily replicate or undermine through predatory strategies. The discussion continued over several weeks, with multiple conversations that addressed specific concerns about partnership terms, decision-making authority, and long-term strategic direction. The process required patience and persistence, but ultimately resulted in Linda's understanding and support for the strategic direction that had transformed our competitive position and growth prospects. The external relationship dynamics created by our success and strategic partnerships generated both opportunities and challenges that required sophisticated management and strategic thinking. The Western Sports partnership had attracted attention from other major brands and retailers who were interested in similar relationships, creating business development opportunities that could further accelerate our growth and market expansion. 3 additional companies approached Chen Textiles about potential partnerships during the 6 months following our Western Sports announcement. Each opportunity represented different strategic advantages and resource commitments that required careful evaluation to determine alignment with our capabilities and long-term objectives. The first inquiry came from Cascade Health Systems, a medical device manufacturer that was interested in licensing our antimicrobial treatment technologies for surgical textile applications. Their proposal included substantial licensing fees and joint development programs that could establish Chen Textiles as a preferred supplier for high-value medical textile markets. The second opportunity emerged from discussions with Pacific Northwest Outdoor Equipment, a company that manufactured technical clothing and gear for outdoor recreation markets. They were seeking innovative fabric treatments that could enhance performance characteristics for extreme weather conditions and demanding use environments, representing applications that could expand our technological capabilities while serving new customer segments. The third partnership proposal came from an unexpected source when Toyota Motor Manufacturing approached us about developing fabric treatments for automotive interior applications. Their interest focused on antimicrobial and odor control properties that could enhance passenger comfort and vehicle value, representing a completely new market opportunity that could diversify our revenue sources significantly. Each partnership opportunity required comprehensive evaluation of technical feasibility, resource requirements, strategic alignment, and potential conflicts with existing customer relationships. The analysis demanded coordination between technical assessment, business development evaluation, and legal review that demonstrated the increasing sophistication of our strategic planning and decision-making processes. The evaluation process also revealed the extent to which my technical expertise and innovation capabilities had become central to Chen Textiles' competitive positioning and strategic options. All three partnership proposals specifically requested my involvement in technical development and ongoing relationship management, confirming that my individual capabilities had become indispensable strategic assets for the organization. However, managing multiple complex partnerships simultaneously would require organizational capabilities and support systems that exceeded our current resources and expertise. The success of our Western sports relationship had demonstrated the potential value of strategic partnerships, but it had also revealed the management complexity and resource requirements that such arrangements demanded. I proposed establishing a dedicated partnership management function that would coordinate between technical development, business development, and operational implementation for complex customer relationships and strategic alliances. The function would include specialized personnel and systems designed to ensure effective communication, project management, and performance monitoring for partnerships that involve joint development programs and exclusive supplier arrangements. Daniel supported the partnership management proposal while offering to assume primary responsibility for developing the operational frameworks and management systems that would enable effective coordination between multiple strategic relationships. His business development background and organizational experience provided ideal preparation for managing the administrative and strategic aspects of complex partnership arrangements. The partnership management function proved essential for maintaining service quality and relationship effectiveness as our strategic commitments expanded and became more sophisticated. The systematic approach enabled us to deliver consistent performance across multiple demanding customer relationships, while maintaining the innovation focus and technical excellence that had established our competitive advantages. The success of our partnership management capabilities attracted additional attention from industry observers and potential customers who were monitoring our strategic development and market positioning. Trade publications began featuring Chen Textiles as an example of successful strategic evolution, from traditional manufacturing to innovation-driven partnership relationships, enhancing our reputation and creating additional business development opportunities. However, the most significant relationship transformation occurred within our internal team, where shared success and collaborative problem-solving had created trust and mutual respect that transcended traditional family hierarchy and role definitions. The challenges we had navigated together had demonstrated that individual expertise and collaborative teamwork could achieve outcomes that exceeded what any single person could accomplish independently. Maria Gonzalez, our production manager, had evolved from operational supervisor to strategic partner, whose manufacturing expertise was essential for implementing complex technical innovations and maintaining quality standards that exceeded customer expectations. Her 23 years of experience provided institutional knowledge and operational wisdom that complemented my technical capabilities and enhanced our collective effectiveness. The relationship with Maria had developed through shared problem-solving during challenging implementation projects and mutual respect for each other's expertise and contributions. Her willingness to embrace innovative manufacturing processes and maintain exacting quality standards had been crucial for establishing a reputation for technical excellence and operational reliability. Working with Sophia has been the most professionally rewarding experience of my career, Maria reflected during our annual performance review meeting. The opportunity to implement cutting-edge technologies and see immediate impacts on product performance and customer satisfaction has transformed my understanding of what manufacturing excellence can achieve. The collaborative relationships within our team had created an organizational culture that valued expertise, innovation, and shared commitment to exceptional performance, regardless of formal hierarchy or traditional role definitions. The culture enabled rapid adaptation to new challenges and opportunities, while maintaining focus on technical excellence and customer satisfaction that differentiated our competitive positioning. The relationship dynamics that had evolved within Chen Textiles demonstrated that successful strategic transformation required not only technical innovation and business development, but also emotional intelligence and collaborative leadership that could navigate complex interpersonal challenges while maintaining family relationships and organizational effectiveness. The lessons learned through managing relationship transitions during periods of rapid change and strategic evolution had prepared our team for continued growth and increasing complexity, while preserving the values and mutual respect that enabled sustained collaboration and shared success. Most importantly, the relationship transformations had established frameworks for continued adaptation and growth that would enable Chen Textiles to maintain family ownership and strategic independence while competing effectively in increasingly sophisticated and demanding markets that required both technical excellence and collaborative partnership capabilities. The crisis that threatened to destroy everything I had built began with a single phone call on a Tuesday morning in February, exactly 18 months after our partnership with Western Sports Enterprises had positioned Chen Textiles as an industry leader in performance textile innovation. The call came from Dr. Jennifer Walsh at Cascade Medical Products, the company with whom I had been developing specialized antimicrobial treatments for surgical textile applications. Sophia, we have encountered a serious problem with the latest batch of treated fabrics you delivered last week. Dr. Walsh's voice carried the kind of controlled urgency that medical professionals use when discussing life-threatening situations. Our quality control testing has identified bacterial growth rates that are significantly higher than your treatment specifications indicated, and we have already distributed some of these materials to 3 hospital systems. The implications of her statement hit me like physical impact. Cascade Medical's surgical textiles were used in operating rooms where infection control represented the difference between successful procedures and potentially fatal complications. If our antimicrobial treatments had failed to perform according to specifications, patients could be exposed to infection risks that could result in serious medical complications, legal liability, and regulatory sanctions that could destroy both companies. What specific performance levels are you measuring? I asked, while simultaneously accessing our production records and quality control data to identify potential causes for the treatment failure. We are seeing bacterial growth rates that are 67% higher than the baseline levels we established during initial testing, Dr. Walsh replied. The antimicrobial efficacy appears to be approximately 38% of the performance characteristics that your specifications guaranteed. The numbers represented catastrophic failure of treatment processes that had previously demonstrated 96% bacterial reduction in comprehensive laboratory testing. The magnitude of performance degradation suggested systematic problems rather than isolated production errors, indicating that fundamental aspects of our manufacturing process had been compromised in ways that we had not detected through our internal quality control systems. I immediately implemented emergency protocols that included halting all production of antimicrobial treated fabrics, conducting comprehensive testing of materials currently in inventory, and notifying all customers who had received products from potentially affected production runs. The scope of potential impact extended beyond Cascade Medical to include Pacific Athletic Wear, 3 industrial textile customers, and the automotive application pilot program we had initiated with Toyota Manufacturing. The investigation that followed revealed the most serious operational crisis in Chen Textile's 70-year history. The antimicrobial treatment failure had resulted from contamination in our chemical storage systems that had occurred gradually over several months, reducing treatment effectiveness in ways that our standard quality control testing had not detected until the contamination reached critical levels. The contamination source was eventually traced to a supplier change that had occurred 6 months earlier, when we had consolidated chemical purchasing to achieve cost savings and operational efficiency. The new supplier's materials met all technical specifications but contained trace impurities that had accumulated in our storage systems over time, eventually reaching concentrations that interfered with the antimicrobial treatment chemistry. However, the technical explanation for the treatment failure was less important than the immediate operational and financial consequences that threatened Chen Textile's survival and my professional reputation. The crisis required coordinated response across multiple dimensions, including customer relationship management, regulatory compliance, financial liability assessment, and operational remediation that exceeded anything our organization had previously encountered. The first priority involved working with Cascade Medical to address immediate patient safety concerns and regulatory reporting requirements. Dr. Walsh had initiated recall procedures for surgical textiles that had been distributed to hospital systems, while also reporting the treatment failure to the Food and Drug Administration as required for medical device components that failed to meet safety specifications. The FDA notification triggered comprehensive regulatory investigation that included inspection of our manufacturing facilities, review of our quality control procedures, and analysis of our treatment processes by government scientists who specialized in antimicrobial technology evaluation. The investigation required substantial documentation and technical testimony that consumed weeks of my time while generating legal expenses that strained our financial resources. Simultaneously, the treatment failure created immediate liability exposure that threatened to exceed our insurance coverage and potentially force Chen Textiles into bankruptcy. Cascade Medical was facing potential lawsuits from hospital systems that had purchased defective materials, while their own insurance carriers were investigating whether coverage would apply to claims resulting from supplier failures rather than their own manufacturing defects. Our insurance company had retained specialized attorneys to evaluate liability exposure and coordinate defense strategies, but preliminary assessments suggested that our coverage might be insufficient to address all potential claims if patients had been harmed by exposure to materials that failed to provide expected antimicrobial protection. The financial implications extended beyond liability exposure to include immediate revenue losses from suspended operations and damaged customer relationships. Pacific Athletic had temporarily suspended orders pending investigation of their own product testing results, while Toyota Manufacturing had formally terminated our pilot program pending resolution of quality control concerns. Within 3 weeks of the initial crisis notification, Chen Textiles' monthly revenue had decreased by 73%, while our legal and remediation expenses had increased to levels that exceeded our quarterly operating budget. The financial stress threatened our ability to meet payroll obligations and loan covenant requirements, creating additional pressures that compounded the operational challenges we were already facing. The crisis also generated intense scrutiny from Meridian Industries, our primary competitor, who had been monitoring our strategic development and market positioning since their unsuccessful recruitment attempts 2 years earlier. Industry publications began featuring articles about quality control failures at innovative textile manufacturers, with specific references to Chen Textiles that damaged our reputation and competitive positioning. Trade association communications and industry conference presentations included discussions of our treatment failure as an example of risks associated with rapid innovation development and inadequate quality control systems. The negative publicity undermined customer confidence and created barriers to new business development that could persist long after the immediate crisis was resolved. However, the most devastating aspect of the crisis was not financial exposure or regulatory investigation, but rather the personal sense of responsibility I felt for patients who might have been harmed by materials that failed to provide the antimicrobial protection I had guaranteed. The possibility that my innovations could have contributed to medical complications rather than improved outcomes challenged my fundamental beliefs about the value and purpose of my technical work. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.